Despite only having the 13th overall pick in the upcoming NBA draft, the Raptors can still address a fundamental need with their team, and a Kentucky point guard by the name of Cason Wallace would certainly do that. So in today's video, I'm going to go through everything that you need to know about the player to tell you why he's a perfect fit for the team. Let's get into it. What's going on, NBA and Raptors fans? This is Amateur Hour Sports, the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors coverage in videos, live streams, and shorts. If you like what you see from today's video and want to see more content just like it, then please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. You can help me on my road to 15,000 subscribers, and to stay up to date with all of the draft profiles I'm doing as we get towards the 2023 NBA entry draft, make sure you have that notification bell on so you don't miss out on any of the possible players the Raptors could draft. And one of the big possibilities the Raptor could snatch up in the 13th overall selection, as long as he falls to that position, is Cason Wallace, a point guard out of the University of Kentucky, who is my favorite prospect heading into this draft as far as who the Raptors can realistically get with their position. And I'm going to explain to you exactly why I'm so in love with this player over the course of the video. So what we want to hit on, first of all, I'm going to give you exactly who is Cason Wallace, so you know who the player is before we get into the meat of the video. We're going to go through his stats from his freshman season with the University of Kentucky once again. We're going to go into his strengths. We're going to go into his weaknesses because not every player is perfect. And we're also finally going to finish off with the player comparable. And this player comparable is super exciting. You're going to want to stick around to the end of the video to see who it is and why that fits so well with the Toronto Raptors and what they want to do going forward. So first of all, who is Cason Wallace? Well, I told you everything about his school, only coming out of his first year with this school before declaring for the NBA draft, and he's only 19 years old. That's great from a draft age perspective. Plenty of room to grow, plenty of room for the Raptors development team to mold the player. The 6'6" wingspan is pretty good for a point guard, I will say, but what is really good for a point guard is being 6'4". Raptors in the last decade or so constantly have had point guards who aren't very tall. Certainly, they play above their size. Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet play above their size, maybe more so Kyle Lowry for that conversation. But Cason Wallace at 6'4" would be great for the position. So what has a player been able to do with these great traits? What has he been able to execute in that season with the University of Kentucky? Well, as far as the scoring goes, he wasn't the most prolific scorer, I will say. 11.7 points per game, but did drop 4.3 assists per game, had a great assist to turnover ratio, which we'll go a little bit further into as we get through the video. 3.7 rebounds, and don't think that does enough justice to his rebounding. He's a good rebounder. He rebounds pretty well, and his size would certainly help in that category. Going further down the list, what's extremely impressive, maybe the most impressive thing in his game, is the 2 steals per game. He's a great defender. That stat doesn't tell you everything, but we'll go a little bit further once again into why he is such a great defender as we get to the strengths eventually. Also, pretty efficient here, averaging about 45% from the field in shooting and just under 35% from 3 shooting on over 4 3-point attempts per game. That is a great sign to see your point guard being able to handle the ball, initiate the offense, but also a player who is able to shoot. So let's get into those strengths here. I know you're itching for me to go through it. Let's talk about what makes Cason Wallace such a great player. Well, first of all, we need to discuss the defense. The defense is the biggest positive that this player possesses. He is an absolutely hounding defender in 1v1. He has active hands to cut off passing lanes. He reads the game very well. He never gives up on plays and transitions, which can save some buckets here or there. And he just racks up steals at such an incredible rate. We saw the 2 steals per game. This is definitely something that he is going to be able to translate to the NBA level as well. But with the defense comes also the offensive side of the game, which is great. It's not as strong as the defense, which is just so strong. He might be the best perimeter defender in this upcoming draft class, but the offensive stuff doesn't let him down either. I spoke about the assist to turnover ratio, averaging over 4 assists per game and averaging in the low 2s as it comes to the turnovers per game. So that's something as well, which will be great for the NBA. Doesn't lose the ball very much, a very sound point guard. He's also great at creating his own shot, which is nice to see for your point guard, having that little bit of shot creation, but also he's able to have that offensive penetration. That's what you're looking for a lot in point guards these days. It's not something I cared too much about in most of my life watching the NBA, but in the last year, I've really started to discover how important offensive penetration is for a player, particularly a point guard, to be able to initiate the offense, to be able to get the defense moving, to be able to isolate mismatches, to be able to pick out open teammates, and he's quite good at doing that. There are some certain things he can improve there, which we'll talk about, but he is still quite good at doing these things. With the shot creation going a little bit further over there are a variety of ways he can score. We saw that he has a great three-point shooting percentage. This can be off the dribble, but he's also turning into a really good catch-and-shoot threat from the outside. Something great for the Raptors. Something the Raptors could definitely use in the point guard position. But going further along with the shot creation, he's not just good from the outside, he's pretty good at scoring from the inside. What I love about him from his offensive penetration is that he has a good runner game, he has a good floater game. That's something that Raptors point guards just haven't really had recently. Fred VanVleet, I like the player. One thing that would really take his game to the next level is the floater game, which he doesn't have. Cason Wallace does have that floater game, a great sight to see. I spoke briefly about the transition defense, which is good. The transition game is also very good on the offensive end. Really pushes the ball, really gets the ball out ahead of him and can run the court very quickly, which can generate some great possession for the Raptors after they generate steals. And hey, for a guy who's creating a lot of steals himself, it's good for him to be able to then take the ball, move it in transition, and make the right play. Finally, as far as the strengths goes, we have the size, 6'4", and the strength. Can stand to put on a little bit of muscle, but seems to have a body that can handle that, but is also already very strong for his size. But with those strengths, again, there are some weaknesses with a player that we need to address. Cason Wallace is a player that there's just some things about his game that maybe don't quite cater to exactly what you would want from a point guard, but these are things you can definitely work on or things that you could maybe overlook and think could improve for the future. Starting off with the weaknesses, we need to talk about the scoring. Under 12 points per game for a player of his caliber, there were expectations that he would be doing a little bit more than that this season. He's still good at putting the ball in the basket, but at the higher volumes, we're kind of waiting to see, which would indicate that this is not really going to be a guy who's going to be leading your team from a scoring standpoint. But maybe you don't quite need that from him. You don't quite need him to be your focal point. You need him to be playing within your team. And for a team that has Scottie Barnes, who you want to be your top scorer at some point, that still makes sense for this team to be able to draft at 13th overall. Something else that is a little bit concerning is explosiveness. He's by no means a bad athlete, but he's not the most explosive player. And as a result, he doesn't quite generate that first step separation that some other elite guards are able to do in this draft class, mainly looking at Nick Smith Jr., mainly looking at obviously a Scoot Henderson or an Anthony Black. Still a good player, does well with the ball in his hands, but that first step separation just makes that a little bit harder for him to create what he's looking for on the inside. And on the inside, there can be some problems. He's good at getting that offensive penetration, but sometimes his decision-making is a little bit lacking once he's there. He's not a very good left-handed dribbler, which allows defenses to telegraph his game a little bit more than you would like. They can bait him into some bad decisions. They can bait him into some bad shots, bait him into some bad passes. But for a player of his caliber, this is certainly something that he can work on. The Raptors development team can work on with him to help that get to the next level. And when it came to that left-hand dribbling, like I said, the operation traffic suffered as a result. But the final thing here, and this is something that needs to be handled by the medical team going into the draft to make sure he's a suitable pick. Cason Wallace has dealt with some back issues, and there's some rumblings that that was the reason he struggled with the explosiveness, that he struggled a little bit with the first step in his season with the University of Kentucky. So the Raptors are going to have to do their due diligence in making sure everything is okay on that front. Hey, if they're assessing that there were some back problems and those can be solved when he gets into the NBA, well, that explosiveness is going to come back. With the explosiveness that we saw from this player in high school that made him so extraordinarily intriguing. Still very intriguing, but just imagine getting that extra athleticism, extra explosiveness back into this game. This player can really get and really excel at the next level. That is an exciting prospect for the Toronto Raptors. So with all this information, all the information that we have here, this seems like a really good option for the Raptors at 13th overall, but if you're not really in tune with draft picks as much as maybe myself or other people watching this video, who is the player comparable that you can really compare his game to at the NBA level to see potentially what the Raptors are going to be getting? And for me, the best player comparable, I've looked around, I've seen a bunch of different ones. The one that makes the most sense for me is Jrue Holiday. Just an absolute hounding defender, generates steals, pushes the ball well in transition. Not the most prolific scorer, but can create for his teammates, can get his own jump shot, can get to the rim, can have that little bit of a floater game as well. Jrue Holiday makes the most sense from a player comparable perspective. And the Raptors, I mean, the point guard woes that this team has had in the last few years. I'm a big fan of Fred VanVleet. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying Fred VanVleet necessarily the problem with this team, but depth issues. Like the last 2 years, it has just been Fred VanVleet. And it kind of feels like we've run him into the ground the last couple of years because off the bench, well, it's Malachi Flynn, who you can't trust in long minutes. It's Delano Banton, you can't trust in long minutes. Sometimes these guys get no minutes. So we're really running all these makeshift point guards here. Well, finally, if the Raptors want to compete next season, you can put in Cason Wallace as your backup point guard and mold him for the future and maybe look to move on from Fred VanVleet eventually. If you want to move in a different direction, you can sign and trade Fred VanVleet. I think Cason Wallace would be a suitable player to come in and be your starting point guard from day one. So there's a lot of things that make sense about Cason Wallace, and having that Jrue Holiday type of build, type of mindset, type of player, I think really benefits this team going forward. The defensive stuff is there. We're going to be provided with the opportunity, if we can draft him, to take his game to the next level on the offensive end. We don't need the most prolific scorer, as maybe some lower teams in the draft do, with all due respect. But we could use a point guard. Use a point guard who has that tactical approach and plays some excellent defense. And with his size, guess what? If Fred VanVleet is still on the team, Cason Wallace fits the build of the modern combo guard. You can play him next to Fred VanVleet. Maybe that gets Fred VanVleet in the shooting guard position on the offensive end. That gives him a little bit more catch and shoot stuff instead of on the ball stuff. On the defensive end, you can still run your matchups as you see fit based on size, but Cason Wallace, a lot of options, seamlessly fits in from day one. That pick makes a lot of sense. It's just Cason Wallace is a damn good player. We have to wait 12 picks before we are able to make that selection. And the teams ahead of us, there are a couple here and there. Like, I'm looking at OKC. I don't think OKC would take Cason Wallace. Obviously, they have guards. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is there. One team that worries me at 11th overall. Oh man, Orlando could really use a point guard right now. I like Markelle Fultz, but other than that, I don't think they're particularly thrilled with the guard depth that they have, and defense could stand to improve in that team. Cason Wallace does make a lot of sense for Orlando, but there's a distinct possibility that they're looking for somebody a little bit more explosive, somebody who handles himself under pressure, surrounded by teams in traffic in the paint. And maybe he falls to 13th overall, where the Raptors should 100% snap him up based on the need for this team, what Cason Wallace has ability-wise. I think that this is almost a no-brainer pick at 13th overall if the player is available. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below, and let me know who I should cover next in the draft profile series as we get towards the 2023 NBA draft here on Amateur Hour Sports. For more content just like this, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Help me on my road to 15,000 subscribers, and to help this video reach some new people, help out with that YouTube algorithm. It does make a big difference if you do hit that like button and hit that notification bell as well, so you never miss out on the draft profile content coming your way very soon on Amateur Hour Sports. We'll see you again next time for another video.